I'm Lindsay Wells, 34, and last Christmas changed my life forever. Standing in my childhood home's hallway, I froze as I heard my family plotting to humiliate me at our annual dinner. She needs to face reality, my father said, unaware I was listening. After dinner, we'll show everyone her failures. My stomach dropped as they laughed. Their plan was cruel, but what they didn't know was that I'd already succeeded beyond their wildest expectations. Before I tell you how I discovered my family's shocking plan, let me know where you're watching from in the comments and hit subscribe to follow my journey from heartbreak to healing. The snow fell gently as I pulled into the driveway of my parents' colonial-style home in Boston. The red brick facade and white trim, now adorned with twinkling Christmas lights and an elegant wreath, looked like something from a holiday card. 3 years had passed since my last visit, 3 years of building my freelance graphic design business, 3 years of proving to myself what my family never believed, that I could make it on my own. I sat in my car for a moment, gathering courage. At 34, I shouldn't have felt like a teenager dreading family judgment, but old patterns die hard. My parents had always been successful in traditional ways. Dad was a corporate attorney, Mom a hospital administrator, and they never understood my creative ambitions. My siblings followed the prescribed path. Ethan, 36, climbed the corporate ladder at a financial firm, while Heather, 32, was a rising star in pharmaceutical sales. Then there was me, the middle child who chose a different path. The family disappointment. What my family didn't know was that I'd recently landed a contract with Apex Technologies, designing their entire rebranding campaign. The deal had not only secured my financial stability for the next year but had garnered industry attention. For once, I was arriving home with undeniable success. I grabbed my suitcase and trudged through the snow to the front door. Before I could knock, it swung open. Lindsay. Finally. My mother, Grace, stood in the doorway wearing a cashmere sweater and perfectly applied makeup, her blonde hair swept into an elegant updo. She air-kissed my cheeks. We were beginning to think you got lost. Come in before you freeze. The house smelled of cinnamon and pine, Christmas scents that should have brought comfort but instead tightened the knot in my stomach. Hi, Mom, I said, stepping inside. Sorry for the delay. The traffic from the airport was terrible. Well, you're here now. She looked me up and down, eyes lingering on my casual jeans and sweater. You could have dressed a bit nicer for the occasion, but I suppose that's the creative type in you. And there it was. Less than 30 seconds and the first dig had landed. My father appeared in the hallway, scotch in hand. The prodigal daughter returns, he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Thomas Wells, with his silver hair and commanding presence, had a way of making me feel small with just a glance. Hi, Dad, I said, accepting his stiff, one-armed hug. You've lost weight, he observed. Not eating properly in that apartment of yours? You know, if you had a real job with benefits, you could afford better groceries. I bit back a retort. My apartment was actually a beautiful loft in Seattle with a separate studio space for my work. And I could afford plenty of groceries, thank you very much. Lindsay. My sister Heather bounded down the stairs, her perfect smile gleaming. She looked like she'd stepped out of a J.Crew catalog in her red cardigan and pearl earrings. Oh my God, your hair. It's so different. She touched my shoulder-length bob that I'd recently dyed a subtle purple at the ends. Bold choice for job interviews, isn't it? I don't do job interviews, Heather. I have clients, remember? Right, your little drawings. She smiled condescendingly. So how's that going? Making ends meet? Before I could respond, my brother Ethan emerged from the living room. Hey, Linz, he said with casual indifference. Glad you could tear yourself away from your freelancing. The way he said the word made it sound like a hobby rather than my career. The guest room is all made up, Mom interjected, perhaps sensing my rising irritation. The same one you always had. We kept it just as it was. That was part of the problem. In their minds, I was frozen in time, the wayward daughter who needed to grow up and join the real world. Thanks, I said, I think I'll go freshen up before dinner. I escaped upstairs, dragging my suitcase behind me. The guest room, my old bedroom, was indeed exactly as I'd left it. The pale blue walls, the twin bed with its floral comforter, the desk where I'd first discovered my passion for design. It felt like a museum exhibit of someone else's life. I unpacked slowly, trying to center myself. I was an adult with a successful career. I didn't need their approval. So why did being here make me feel like I was shrinking? After arranging my things, I decided to go downstairs for some hot chocolate, a small comfort in this uncomfortable situation. As I approached the living room, I heard my name mentioned. I paused in the hallway, just out of sight. "Lindsay needs a reality check," my father was saying. "This freelance nonsense has gone on long enough." "I agree," my mother replied. "That's why Christmas dinner is the perfect opportunity. With all the extended family there, she won't be able to run away from the truth." My blood ran cold. What were they planning? "The PowerPoint is ready," Ethan chimed in. "I've compiled all her failed ventures and career missteps since college. Called it Lindsay's Greatest Failures. Even found those photos from when her first client dropped her and she cried at Thanksgiving dinner." "Perfect," Dad said. "After we announce your promotion to VP, Ethan, and Heather's engagement to Dr. Whitman, we'll stage the intervention. Show her that her so-called career is a fantasy." I clutched the wall for support, feeling dizzy. "Don't forget," my mother added, "Brandon and his wife confirmed they're coming too." Brandon. My ex-fiancé who'd broken our engagement because he couldn't build a future with someone with no real career prospects. And they'd invited him to witness my humiliation. "She'll finally see how far behind she is," Heather said with a laugh. "Maybe then she'll accept Dad's connection at Mitchell and Barnes. A real design job with a real company. It's for her own good," Mom concluded. "Sometimes people need to be shown their failures before they can move forward." I backed away silently, my hot chocolate forgotten. Their words echoed in my head as I retreated to my room, closed the door, and sank onto the bed. My own family had spent time and effort planning to humiliate me in front of everyone I knew, just to prove they were right about me. What they didn't know was that they were completely, utterly wrong. My hands trembled as I closed the bedroom door behind me. I slid down against it until I hit the floor, my breathing shallow and quick. The room seemed to spin as their words replayed in my mind like a cruel soundtrack. Lindsay's Greatest Failures, reality check, intervention. I fumbled for my phone and called the one person who had always believed in me. Mackenzie Moore, my best friend, answered on the second ring, her voice cheerful. "Mac," I whispered, my voice breaking. "They're going to ambush me." "Linz? What's happening? Who's ambushing you?" Her tone shifted immediately to concern. I explained everything I'd overheard, each word feeling like glass in my throat. As I spoke, hot tears rolled down my cheeks, dropping onto my sweater. "Those absolute monsters," Mackenzie hissed when I finished. "Get out of there. Now. Pack your bags and come stay with me. My flight lands in Boston tomorrow morning." I had forgotten that Mackenzie was visiting her own family just an hour away. Her immediate offer of refuge was tempting. So tempting. "I can't just leave," I said, though a large part of me wanted to do exactly that. "Why the hell not? They're planning to publicly humiliate you." I wiped my tears and took a deep breath. "Because then they win. They get to say I ran away again, that I couldn't face reality." The irony wasn't lost on me. The reality was that I'd succeeded despite their constant undermining. My portfolio included work for nationally recognized brands. My bank account was healthier than it had ever been. I had finally built the life and career I wanted. "Then what's your plan?" Mackenzie asked. I glanced around the room, my eyes landing on my laptop bag. "I don't know yet. But I'm not going to let them define me anymore." After hanging up, I lay on my childhood bed staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars I had stuck on the ceiling when I was 12. I remembered the night I'd put them up, Dad had called it a waste of time, Mom had worried about damage to the paint. Even then, my creative expressions were seen as problems to be solved. Sleep evaded me that night. Every creak of the house, every distant laugh from my family downstairs felt like another betrayal. I scrolled through my portfolio on my laptop, reminding myself of what I had accomplished. Award-winning campaigns. Satisfied clients. Financial independence. By morning, my eyes were puffy and red, but I had made a decision: I would stay and gather more information. I needed to understand the full extent of their plan before deciding how to respond. I splashed cold water on my face, applied concealer to hide the evidence of my sleepless night, and headed downstairs. In the kitchen, my mother was already preparing breakfast, the counters covered with mixing bowls and ingredients. "Good morning, sunshine," she said with artificial brightness. "Did you sleep well?" "Like a log," I lied, matching her fake cheerfulness. "Need any help?" "You can whisk the eggs," she said, sliding a bowl toward me. "Your father and siblings are in the dining room. We're planning the Christmas dinner seating chart." Of course they were. Probably making sure I was seated for maximum humiliation. As I whisked the eggs, Mom chatted about neighborhood gossip and holiday plans, acting as though she hadn't been plotting against me the night before. I nodded and smiled at appropriate intervals, playing along with the charade. "You know," she said, lowering her voice, "your father and I worry about you, Lindsay." I tensed but kept whisking. "I'm doing fine, Mom." "Are you, though? Living alone in that apartment, no stability, no benefits." She sighed dramatically. "When I was your age, I was already established in my career, had you children, a proper home. Times are different now," I said carefully. "Success looks different for different people." She patted my arm condescendingly. "Of course, dear. We just want what's best for you. That's all we've ever wanted." The eggs began to form peaks under my increasingly aggressive whisking. I wondered if she actually believed her own words or if she recognized the manipulation for what it was. "The eggs are done," I said, setting down the whisk before I snapped it in half. Throughout breakfast, I felt like an anthropologist studying a hostile tribe. I observed how my father dominated the conversation, how Ethan sought his approval, how Heather performed perfectionism. I noticed how they spoke about my cousins and aunts and uncles, categorizing them as successes or failures based on rigid metrics of wealth and status. And I realized something important: I had never belonged here, and that wasn't my failing, it was my salvation. After breakfast, I made it my mission to confirm exactly what I was up against. The house was quiet as everyone dispersed to their own activities: Dad to his study for important calls, Mom to prepare for a lunch with her friends, Heather to the mall for last-minute shopping, and Ethan to the home gym in the basement. This was my chance. First, I casually made my way to the dining room where Mom had left her party planning binder. Flipping through the pages, I found the guest list for Christmas dinner. There it was in Mom's perfect handwriting: Brandon and Christine Miller. My ex-fiancé and his new wife were indeed invited, listed right next to my name with a small asterisk. My stomach lurched. Brandon had left me 3 years ago, claiming my career choice showed a lack of ambition and responsibility. "I need someone who can be an equal partner," he'd said while packing his things from our apartment. Not someone chasing a pipe dream. 2 months later, he was engaged to Christine, a corporate lawyer from his firm. The betrayal had been like a physical blow then. Now, seeing his name on the list felt like reopening an old wound, exactly what my family intended. I continued my investigation, making my way to the guest room where Ethan was staying. He had mentioned working on a PowerPoint, which meant his laptop likely contained evidence. It was a risk, but I needed to see for myself. Luck was on my side. Ethan had left his laptop on the desk, and even more fortunately, he hadn't logged out. A quick search through his recent files revealed a PowerPoint presentation titled exactly as he'd said: Lindsay's Greatest Failures. With shaking hands, I clicked it open. The presentation was worse than I'd imagined. 27 slides chronicling every career setback I'd experienced, from my first rejected design proposal in college to a client who had dropped me early in my freelance career. There were embarrassing photos, me crying at Thanksgiving after losing that first big client, screenshots of my website during its early, admittedly amateur days, a graph comparing my estimated income to Ethan's and Heather's over the years, with no actual data from me, just their assumptions. The final slide read, "Time to grow up, a family intervention." I felt sick but forced myself to examine every slide, to absorb the full extent of their plan. They had been collecting this information for years, saving each perceived failure like ammunition. What struck me most was how outdated their information was. They had nothing from the past year and a half, nothing about my successful rebranding of a national coffee chain, nothing about my design award, nothing about Apex Technologies. They had been so committed to their narrative of my failure that they hadn't bothered to check if it was still accurate. I carefully closed the file and left everything as I'd found it, then retreated to the hallway. As I turned to leave, I nearly collided with Heather. "Lindsay," she exclaimed, startled. "What are you doing in Ethan's room?" I thought quickly. "Looking for a phone charger. Mine's not working." Heather looked suspicious but handed me one from her purse. "Use mine. You shouldn't be snooping around." The irony of her statement wasn't lost on me. "Thanks," I said, taking the charger. Then, deciding to test the waters, I added, "So, I hear Christmas dinner is going to be quite an event this year." A flicker of guilt crossed her face before she composed herself. "What do you mean?" "Just that there seem to be a lot of special announcements planned." Heather glanced around nervously, then pulled me into her room and closed the door. "Look, I wanted to tell you, but they thought it would be better as a surprise." "What would be better as a surprise?" I pressed, playing dumb. She sighed, perching on the edge of her bed. "My engagement, for one. Richard proposed last month." "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely happy for her despite everything. "Congratulations." "Thanks." She twisted her hands in her lap. "And Ethan's promotion. He's going to be the youngest VP in his firm's history." "That's impressive," I acknowledged. "But why keep these things secret from me?" Heather's eyes wouldn't meet mine. "It wasn't my idea, Lindsay. Mom and Dad thought. They thought having all this good news at once might help you see." "See what?" I challenged, though I knew exactly what she meant. "That maybe your choices haven't led to the same kind of success," she finished quietly. "They're just worried about you." "We all are." I felt a surge of anger but kept my voice steady. "And does this worry include creating a presentation of my failures to show the entire family?" Her head snapped up, eyes wide with shock. "You know about that? I overheard you all talking last night." Heather had the decency to look ashamed. "It wasn't supposed to be cruel, Lindsay. It was supposed to be an intervention. To help you. By humiliating me in front of everyone? Including my ex-fiancé?" She winced. "That was Dad's idea. He said having Brandon there would show you what you've lost by pursuing this hobby." "It's not a hobby, Heather. It's my career. A successful one, I might add, though none of you have bothered to ask about it in years." "Is it, though?" she asked, not unkindly. "Because the last we heard, you were struggling to find clients and barely making rent." "The last you heard?" I repeated. "When was that, exactly?" She thought for a moment. "I guess, about 2 years ago?" "And in those 2 years, did anyone, you, Mom, Dad, Ethan, ever actually ask me how my business was doing? Did anyone call to check on me, to see if I was still struggling?" Her silence was answer enough. "You've all been so convinced that I would fail that you didn't even consider the possibility that I might succeed," I said. "You've been planning this intervention based on information that's years out of date." "What do you mean?" she asked, confusion clouding her features. I was about to respond when my phone buzzed with a text from Mackenzie, landed. "Coming to you. Hang in there." "I have to go," I said, moving toward the door. But maybe before you all stage an intervention, you should make sure you know what you're intervening about. I left her sitting there, clearly unsettled by our conversation. As I walked back to my room, the weight of their betrayal pressed down on me like a physical force. I barely made it to the bathroom before the panic attack hit, shallow breathing, racing heart, the sensation of the floor dropping away beneath me. I called Mackenzie again, needing her steady presence. They have a PowerPoint, Mac, I gasped between breaths. 27 slides of my failures. They invited Brandon. They've been planning this for years. Breathe, Linz, she instructed firmly. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. Just like we practiced. I followed her instructions, gradually feeling the panic subside. I'm on my way, she assured me. But listen to me, you have options. You could leave now. You could stay and confront them. You could bring your own PowerPoint of successes. She paused. Or you could pull a classic Lindsay Wells creative solution that none of us have thought of yet. Despite everything, I found myself smiling. That was why Mackenzie was my best friend, she always reminded me of who I really was when family made me forget. I think I need to confront them, I said finally. Not at Christmas dinner, not as some big spectacle, but now. Before this goes any further. Are you sure? She asked. I can be there in an hour for backup. I'm sure. This has been festering for too long. I took another deep breath. It's time they heard the truth, my truth. After hanging up, I spent a few minutes composing myself and gathering my thoughts. Then I headed downstairs to find my parents. It was time to lance this family wound once and for all. I found my parents in the living room, huddled together over a tablet, speaking in hushed tones. They looked up guiltily when I entered, my mother quickly setting the tablet screen down on the coffee table. Lindsay, Dad said with forced casualness. We were just discussing the Christmas dinner menu. No, you weren't, I replied calmly, taking a seat across from them. You were discussing me. My intervention, right? Their shocked expressions would have been comical under different circumstances. How did you, Mom began. I overheard you last night, I interrupted. All of you. Planning how to humiliate me in front of the entire family. Dad's face hardened into the stern expression I knew so well. Now, Lindsay, that's not fair. We're not trying to humiliate you. No? Then what would you call a PowerPoint presentation titled Lindsay's Greatest Failures? Mom paled. You went through Ethan's computer? That's an invasion of privacy. The irony was staggering. And planning a public dissection of my life isn't? We're trying to help you, Dad insisted, leaning forward. This freelance fantasy has gone on long enough. You're 34 years old, living alone in a rented apartment, with no stability, no retirement plan, no. How do you know what I have or don't have? I challenged. When was the last time you actually asked me about my work? About my life? You've been so busy collecting evidence of my failures that you missed all my successes. What successes? He scoffed. Drawing pictures on a computer isn't a career, Lindsay. It's a hobby that you've stubbornly refused to outgrow. Each word stung, but I didn't let it show. That hobby paid me $300,000 this year. The stunned silence that followed was deeply satisfying. That's not possible, Mom finally said. You're exaggerating. I'm not. I landed the Apex Technologies account in February. I did their entire rebranding campaign, logo, website, marketing materials, everything. It was featured in Design Quarterly last month. Apex Technologies? Dad repeated, recognition flickering in his eyes. Even he, removed as he was from the design world, knew that name. Yes. And before that, I did Westbrook Coffee's rebranding, which won the National Design Merit Award. I've hired 2 assistant designers this year because I have more work than I can handle alone. But 2 years ago you could barely make rent, Mom stammered. You called us for help with your electricity bill. Yes, I did, I acknowledged. Starting a business is hard. There were lean times. But instead of supporting me through those challenges, you used them as evidence that I was failing. You've been waiting for me to fail from the moment I chose this path. We've only ever wanted what's best for you, Mom said, tears welling in her eyes. We just want you to be secure, to have a stable life. No, you wanted me to follow your definition of success, I corrected. And when I chose a different path, you decided I was wrong rather than considering that there might be more than one way to build a meaningful life. Ethan chose that moment to enter the living room, stopping short when he sensed the tension. What's going on? Lindsay knows about the intervention, Dad informed him. To my surprise, Ethan didn't look ashamed. Instead, he gave me a condescending smile. Maybe it's for the best. Now we can have an honest conversation. Yes, let's do that, I agreed. Let's start with why you felt it necessary to compile a presentation of my perceived failures without ever once asking me how my business is actually doing. We know how it's doing, he said dismissively. You live in a studio apartment and work from your kitchen table. I live in a 2-bedroom loft in Capitol Hill with a separate dedicated studio space, I corrected. And I made more money than you did this year, Ethan. That wiped the smirk off his face. That's not possible. It is when you're good at what you do and work hard at it. I turned back to my parents. But this isn't about money. It's about respect. You've never respected my choices or my career. You've been so convinced that I would fail that you couldn't even consider the possibility that I might succeed on my own terms. We just worry, Mom insisted. Freelancing is so unpredictable. No benefits, no security. I have excellent health insurance that I pay for myself, I informed her. I have a retirement account that I contribute to monthly. I have an emergency fund that would cover 6 months of expenses if I needed it. I'm more financially secure now than I've ever been. If that's true, Dad said, clearly still skeptical, then why not come work for Mitchell & Barnes? Gordon Mitchell has been holding a senior designer position for you. With your talent, if what you're saying is accurate, you could have an even more successful career with proper backing. Because I don't want to work for someone else, I said simply. I built something of my own, something I'm proud of. Why would I give that up to fit into your idea of what success should look like? Because we're your family, Ethan interjected. We know what's best for you. Those words, so confident, so condescending, were the final straw. I felt something break free inside me, a lifetime of trying to earn their approval finally giving way to the realization that I didn't need it. No, you don't, I said quietly. You know what you want from me, which isn't the same thing. And you've been so focused on that vision that you've never seen me, really seen me, at all. I stood up, suddenly exhausted by the weight of their expectations and judgments. I'm going to pack my things. I won't be staying for Christmas dinner. Lindsay, don't be dramatic, Dad said sharply. Running away doesn't solve anything. I'm not running away, I replied. I'm choosing not to participate in my own humiliation. There's a difference. What about family? Mom pleaded. What about tradition? A tradition of undermining me and waiting for me to fail isn't one I care to preserve. I moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I'm happy for Ethan's promotion and Heather's engagement. I wish you had trusted me enough to just share that good news without trying to use it as a weapon against me. As I reached the doorway, Ethan called after me, "You're being delusional about your success, Lindsay. You always exaggerate to make yourself feel better." I turned back one last time. That's the difference between us, Ethan. I don't need to make others feel small to feel good about myself. With that, I walked upstairs to pack my bags, my hands trembling but my mind clearer than it had been in years. For the first time since arriving, I felt like I could breathe freely. I was done letting my family define my worth. I was finally standing up for myself, and it felt like freedom. The lakeside inn wasn't fancy, but the room was clean and, most importantly, mine. Away from the suffocating atmosphere of my parents' house, I could finally think clearly. I sat cross-legged on the queen-sized bed, laptop open beside me, when a knock came at the door. "Room service," called a familiar voice. I opened the door to find Mackenzie, arms full with takeout bags and a bottle of wine. Her curly hair was tucked under a beanie, her nose red from the cold, but her smile was exactly what I needed. "You're a lifesaver," I said, engulfing her in a hug. "I come bearing gifts of pad thai and merlot," she announced, setting everything on the small table by the window. "Now, tell me everything." Over noodles and wine, I recounted the confrontation with my family. Mackenzie listened intently, alternating between outraged exclamations and supportive nods. "I'm proud of you," she said when I finished. "Do you know how long I've waited for you to stand up to them like that?" I twirled noodles around my fork. "I should have done it years ago." "Maybe. But you weren't ready then." She refilled our wine glasses. "So what's the plan now? Are you really skipping Christmas dinner?" I hadn't fully decided yet. Part of me wanted to wash my hands of the whole situation, to fly back to Seattle and forget about my family's cruel plans. But another part, a stronger part, wanted to face this head-on. "I'm thinking about going," I admitted. Not to participate in their intervention, but to take control of the narrative. Mackenzie's eyes lit up. "I like where this is heading. Tell me more." "They've been defining me for years, who I am, what I'm worth, what success looks like. Maybe it's time I showed them who I really am." We spent the evening strategizing. Mackenzie, who worked in marketing, approached it like a campaign. "First, we need to understand your audience. My family. Extended relatives. Brandon and his wife." I grimaced at the last part. "And what's your message?" I thought about it. That I've succeeded on my own terms. That their definition of success isn't the only valid one. Perfect. Now, how do we deliver that message effectively without sinking to their level? That was the tricky part. I didn't want revenge or to humiliate them as they had planned to humiliate me. I wanted something more powerful. I wanted to be seen on my own terms. We pulled out our laptops and began gathering evidence of my success: client testimonials, my design portfolio, press mentions, financial statements. The more we compiled, the more I realized how much I had achieved in the past few years. "You know what's sad?" I said, scrolling through a glowing review from the CEO of Apex Technologies. "They could have just asked me how I was doing. I would have shared all this with them willingly." "That's because you're not threatened by other people's success," Mackenzie pointed out. "They are. Your success on your own terms challenges their entire worldview." The next morning, while Mackenzie went to visit her family, I did something I'd been putting off for years. I researched family dynamics and toxic parenting patterns. The articles and books I found were like reading about my own life: the golden child, Ethan; the scapegoat, me; the lost child, Heather. The patterns were so clear, so predictable, it was almost comforting to know I wasn't alone in my experience. I learned about setting boundaries, about breaking dysfunctional family cycles, about recognizing manipulation tactics. Armed with this knowledge, I felt stronger, more prepared for what was coming. When Mackenzie returned in the afternoon, we went shopping. If I was going to face my family, I wanted to look and feel my absolute best. "No black," Mackenzie instructed as we browsed through racks. "That's what they expect, the rebellious artist in dark colors. We need something unexpected." We settled on a deep emerald green dress that was both professional and striking, paired with gold accessories that highlighted the purple ends of my hair rather than trying to downplay them. The outfit said exactly what I wanted to convey: I am successful, confident, and unapologetically myself. Back at the hotel, we continued refining my approach. I didn't want to create my own PowerPoint or slideshow. That would be playing into their game, meeting pettiness with pettiness. Instead, I decided on something more powerful: radical authenticity. No defensive justifications, I decided. No trying to prove myself to them. Just the simple truth, delivered with confidence. We rehearsed potential scenarios, with Mackenzie playing the roles of my family members, throwing the most cutting remarks she could imagine my way. "Your little drawing hobby isn't a real career," she said in a perfect imitation of my father's dismissive tone. "I understand why you'd see it that way," I practiced responding. "Design isn't a traditional career path, and it can be hard to understand if you're not familiar with the industry. But I built something I'm proud of, and ultimately, that's what matters to me." No defensiveness. No anger. Just calm confidence in my choices and my worth. The night before Christmas Eve, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through all the possible outcomes in my mind. The worst scenarios involved public humiliation, painful confrontations, reopened wounds. But the best scenarios, those involved finally being seen, truly seen, by my family. Or, failing that, the freedom that would come from finally letting go of the need for their approval. "You know what's funny?" I said to Mackenzie, who was reading in the other bed. "A week ago, all I wanted was for them to be proud of me. Now, I realize that I'm proud of myself, and that's what actually matters." She looked up from her book. "That, Lindsay Wells, is what growing up really looks like." I smiled, feeling a sense of peace settle over me. Whatever happened at Christmas dinner, I knew who I was now. And no PowerPoint presentation could take that away from me. The morning of Christmas Eve, I received a text from Heather. "Are you coming tomorrow? Mom is having a meltdown thinking you won't be there." I replied simply, "I'll be there." 3 p.m., right? Her response came quickly, "Yes." "Lindsay, I'm sorry about everything." "I really am." It was a start. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but a small acknowledgement of wrong. I would take it. As I prepared for bed that night, I caught my reflection in the hotel mirror. I looked different somehow, stronger, more centered. The woman looking back at me wasn't the insecure daughter desperate for validation, but a successful professional who knew her own worth. For the first time in my life, I was ready to face my family not as the person they wanted me to be, but as the person I actually was. And regardless of how they responded, I knew I would be okay. Christmas morning dawned clear and cold, sunlight glinting off fresh snow. Mackenzie and I exchanged small gifts in our hotel room, a new sketchbook from her to me, a vintage camera I'd found for her, before preparing for the day ahead. "Remember," Mackenzie said as she helped zip up my emerald dress, "you're not going there to win their approval. You're going to be true to yourself, whether they can handle that or not." I nodded, applying a final touch of lipstick. "Right. I'm not responsible for their reactions, only for my own integrity." We had decided that Mackenzie would arrive shortly after me, giving me time to make my entrance and get settled before having backup. She would pose as my business partner, which wasn't entirely untrue, as she often helped with the marketing side of my design business. As I drove through the familiar streets of my childhood neighborhood, I felt surprisingly calm. The rehearsed scenarios, the preparation, the emotional work of the past few days, it had all led to this moment of clarity. I no longer feared their judgment because I no longer needed their validation. I parked behind a row of unfamiliar cars, relatives had already arrived, and took a deep breath before heading to the front door. I didn't knock, instead using my old key to enter quietly. The house was alive with activity. Christmas music played softly in the background, mingling with the sounds of conversation and laughter. The scent of pine and roasting turkey filled the air. For a moment, I was transported back to happier Christmases, before expectations and judgments had soured the holiday. Aunt Patricia noticed me first, her eyebrows rising in surprise at my appearance. "Lindsay! Look at you," she exclaimed, drawing attention my way. Conversations paused as heads turned. I stood in the entryway, shoulders back, chin up, smiling genuinely. The emerald dress caught the light, and I could see the impact of the transformation in their eyes. I didn't look like the struggling artist they had expected. My mother emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. "Lindsay," she said, her voice a mixture of relief and wariness. "You came." "I said I would," I replied simply, stepping forward to kiss her cheek. "Merry Christmas, Mom." She seemed thrown by my composure. "Merry Christmas. You look different. Thank you, I said, moving past her to greet other relatives. For the next hour, I circulated among family members, answering questions about my life in Seattle with honest but measured responses. Yes, my design business was doing well. No, I wasn't seeing anyone seriously at the moment. Yes, the purple in my hair was intentional, a bit of creative expression. I noticed my father watching me from across the room, his expression unreadable. Ethan hovered near him, occasionally whispering something in his ear. Their planned intervention was clearly still on the agenda, despite my confrontation days earlier. And then I saw him. Brandon, standing by the fireplace with his wife Christine. He looked exactly as I remembered, tall, conventionally handsome, exuding the confidence of someone who had never doubted his path in life. Christine was pretty in a polished way, her blonde hair in a perfect bob, her outfit straight out of a Brooks Brothers catalog. Our eyes met, and for a moment, I felt a twinge of the old pain. But it passed quickly, replaced by the realization that we had never been right for each other. He had wanted me to be someone I wasn't. Just like my family. Brandon approached, pulling Christine along. Lindsay, good to see you, he said, his voice overly hearty. This is my wife, Christine. Lovely to meet you, I said, extending my hand. Brandon's spoken highly of your work at Mercer and Stone. This wasn't true, but I had done my research. Christine looked surprised and pleased. Thank you. I've recently made junior partner. Congratulations, I said sincerely. That's a significant achievement. The conversation might have continued awkwardly, but the doorbell rang, announcing Mackenzie's arrival. I excused myself to answer it, grateful for the timing. How's it going? She whispered as I let her in. So far, so good. But the main event hasn't started yet. We rejoined the gathering just as my mother announced that dinner was ready. The dining room table had been extended to accommodate all 20 guests, decorated with Mom's best china and elaborate centerpieces. Name cards marked each place setting, and I noticed with a grim satisfaction that I had been positioned directly across from Brandon and Christine, with Ethan to my right. Strategic placement for maximum impact during their intervention. As everyone settled into their seats, I introduced Mackenzie as my business partner. Mackenzie handles the marketing side of my design firm, I explained, noting how my parents exchanged glances at the word firm. Dinner began with Dad's traditional Christmas toast, followed by the passing of serving dishes. The conversation flowed around holiday topics, family updates, and current events. On the surface, it was a normal family gathering, but I could feel the undercurrent of tension, the occasional meaningful glances between my parents and Ethan. They were waiting for the right moment. It came after the main course, as plates were being cleared for dessert. Dad tapped his glass with a spoon, calling for attention. Before we move to dessert, we have some exciting family announcements to share, he began, smiling broadly. First, we're thrilled to announce that our son Ethan has been promoted to vice president at Meridian Financial Group, making him the youngest VP in the company's history. Applause erupted around the table. Ethan nodded modestly, accepting congratulations from all sides. And, Dad continued, our daughter Heather has recently become engaged to Dr. Richard Whitman. More applause as Heather held up her left hand, showing off an impressive diamond ring. Richard, seated beside her, beamed with pride. I clapped sincerely for both announcements, genuinely happy for my siblings despite everything else. But I knew what was coming next. Dad cleared his throat, his expression shifting to one of false concern. And now, with the family gathered together, we wanted to address something important. He looked directly at me. Our daughter Lindsay. Dad, Heather interrupted, her voice uncharacteristically sharp. Don't do this. He looked at her in surprise. Heather, we've discussed this. It's for her own good. No, it's not, she insisted. I was wrong to go along with it. We all were. A tense silence fell over the table. Relatives looked confused, sensing the undercurrent but not understanding it. I decided it was time to take control of the narrative. It's okay, Heather, I said calmly. I know about the intervention you all planned. The PowerPoint about my failures. The whole spectacle designed to show me how unsuccessful I am compared to Ethan and Heather. Gasps and murmurs rippled around the table. My Aunt Martha looked particularly horrified. Lindsay, Mom began, that's not what. It's exactly what this is, I interrupted gently. And I understand why you thought it was necessary. You've never understood my choices or believed in my path. You've been waiting for me to fail for so long that you couldn't see that I've actually succeeded. Dad's face had reddened. Now listen here. No, Dad. For once, I need you to listen to me. I straightened in my chair, making eye contact with everyone at the table. The truth is, I'm not a failure. My design business has thrived beyond what even I imagined possible. This year alone, I secured the Apex Technologies account, rebranding their entire company and earning more in that single contract than most designers make in 5 years. Brandon's eyebrows shot up at the mention of Apex. His law firm had likely handled their legal work. I've won industry awards, been featured in design publications, and now employ 2 assistant designers because I have more work than I can handle alone. I paused, letting the information sink in. I'm not telling you this to brag. I'm telling you because you've never asked. You've been so convinced of my failure that you never considered the possibility of my success. The silence around the table was deafening. I didn't come here today for your approval, I continued. I came because, despite everything, you're my family. And I thought maybe, just maybe, you might be happy for me the way I'm genuinely happy for Ethan and Heather. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone, opening my design portfolio website. If anyone's interested in what I actually do, you're welcome to look. But whether you understand my work or not, whether you approve of my choices or not, I'm proud of what I built. And that's what matters to me now. I passed my phone to Aunt Martha, who began scrolling through images of my work, her expression shifting from confusion to admiration. This is yours, she asked, pointing to the Apex logo. I see this everywhere. Yes, I confirmed. That's mine. The phone made its way around the table, conversation slowly resuming as relatives asked genuine questions about my work for the first time. To my surprise, Brandon was one of them. Apex is a major client, he said, examining a branding package on my phone. Their legal team wouldn't approve a rebranding unless it was top-tier work. It wasn't quite an apology for underestimating me, but it was an acknowledgement of my professional worth. Dad remained silent, his planned intervention derailed completely. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, whether from embarrassment or emotion, I couldn't tell. Ethan looked stunned, his carefully constructed superiority visibly crumbling. Mackenzie squeezed my hand under the table, a silent gesture of pride and support. As dessert was served, the atmosphere gradually lightened. Some relatives made a point of engaging with me, asking about Seattle, my design process, my clients. Others clearly didn't know how to react to the unexpected turn of events and kept to safer topics. When dinner finally concluded, I quietly informed my mother that Mackenzie and I wouldn't be staying the night as planned, but that I would return for my things the next day. Lindsay, wait, she said, catching my arm as I prepared to leave. I didn't know about your success. I really didn't. I know, Mom. That's the point. You never asked. She looked down, then back up at me, her eyes filled with conflict. Are you happy? Living that life? It was such a simple question, but it was the first time she'd ever asked it. Yes, I said honestly. I am. She nodded slowly, processing this information that didn't fit her preconceptions. Well, that's good. It wasn't reconciliation, not yet. But it was a crack in the wall, a small opening where light might eventually shine through. As Mackenzie and I walked to our cars, several relatives followed us out, including my cousin Sarah and her husband Michael. We'd love to visit you in Seattle sometime, Sarah said, hugging me goodbye. What you've built sounds amazing, Lindsay. One by one, they expressed similar sentiments, small bridges extending across the chasm my parents had created. Even if my immediate family couldn't see me clearly yet, others could. And that, too, was a kind of victory. As we drove away from the house that had never truly felt like home, Mackenzie turned to me. So? How does it feel? I considered the question, watching the Christmas lights blur past my window. Free, I said finally. It feels like freedom. 1 year later, my Seattle apartment was filled with the sounds of laughter and conversation as friends gathered around a generously decorated Christmas tree. The large windows of my loft overlooked the twinkling city skyline, snow falling gently against the darkening December sky. More wine, anyone? I asked, circulating with a bottle of Cabernet. My new space, a 2-bedroom loft with a separate studio, reflected both my professional success and personal growth over the past year. Gone were the temporary furnishings of my early freelance days, replaced by thoughtfully chosen pieces that expressed my design aesthetic and newfound sense of permanence. Mackenzie lounged on the sofa beside her boyfriend Paul, while my assistants Emma and Jaden chatted with other friends near the kitchen island. In the corner, my neighbor Katie played soft Christmas music on the keyboard. The atmosphere was warm, relaxed, everything a holiday gathering should be. It had been a transformative year. After that fateful Christmas confrontation with my family, I'd returned to Seattle with a new sense of self-possession. No longer haunted by the need for my parents' approval, I'd thrown myself into both work and healing. The therapy journey hadn't been easy. Unpacking decades of family dynamics took time and often left me emotionally drained after sessions. But gradually, I began to understand the patterns that had defined my family, how my parents' own insecurities had shaped their treatment of me, how Ethan had been trapped in the golden child role just as I'd been cast as the family disappointment. Understanding didn't excuse their behavior, but it helped me contextualize it. Their actions weren't about my worth, they were about their limitations. Professional success continued to flourish alongside my personal growth. Apex Technologies had renewed their contract, impressed with the results of my rebranding work. 2 major new clients had signed on, allowing me to expand my small design firm. What had once been a solo operation now employed 4 people, with plans to add another designer in the new year. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced down to see Heather's name on the screen. Merry Christmas, sis. Thinking of you today. Call when you can? Of all my immediate family, Heather was the only one with whom I maintained regular contact. Our relationship had transformed over the past year, evolving from competitive siblings to something approaching genuine friendship. She'd been the first to recognize the toxicity of our family dynamics, the first to apologize sincerely for her role in perpetuating them. Our conversations had started tentatively, brief text exchanges that gradually lengthened into phone calls. She'd visited Seattle in March, spending a weekend exploring the city and getting to know the life I'd built. By summer, she was calling regularly, often seeking advice as she navigated her own journey of setting boundaries with our parents. Your sister? Mackenzie asked, noticing my small smile as I tucked the phone away. I nodded. She's spending Christmas with Richard's family this year. Probably for the best. My relationship with my parents remained distant. There had been awkward phone calls in the months following last Christmas, attempts at connection that faltered because they couldn't quite acknowledge what had happened. Mom occasionally sent care packages containing childhood mementos and favorite recipes, olive branches of a sort. Dad remained largely silent, communicating primarily through Mom. Ethan and I hadn't spoken since that night. His entire identity had been built around being the successful child, the one who had followed the prescribed path. My success on my own terms had shaken that foundation, and he hadn't yet found a way to reconcile it with his worldview. I had stopped expecting him to try. Earth to Lindsay, Jake called from the kitchen, breaking my reverie. The timer for the cookies is beeping. Jake Harrison had entered my life in February, a software engineer who had moved into the apartment below mine. Our relationship had developed slowly, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared values. He understood my boundaries around family, never pushing for more than I was ready to give. Tonight, he moved comfortably among my friends, his quiet confidence and gentle humor a steadying presence. As I rescued the cookies from the oven, I reflected on how different this Christmas felt from the last, surrounded by people who saw and accepted me for who I actually was, not who they wanted me to be. Later, as the party wound down and guests began to depart with warm hugs and promises to meet in the new year, Jake helped me clear away dishes and glasses. "Successful event," he commented, loading the dishwasher. "Everyone seemed to have a good time." "It was perfect," I agreed. "Exactly the Christmas I wanted." When only Mackenzie remained, the three of us settled on the couch with mugs of hot chocolate, the Christmas tree lights casting a warm glow over the room. "So," Mackenzie said, nudging me gently with her foot. 1 year later. "Any regrets about how things went down with your family?" I considered the question carefully. "No regrets," I said finally. Sadness sometimes, for what could have been if they'd been able to see me clearly. But standing up for myself that night was one of the healthiest decisions I've ever made. "You created boundaries," Jake observed. "That takes courage." "It does," I agreed. "And it's ongoing work. Every time Mom calls and makes a subtle dig about my unconventional life, every time I hear about Dad telling relatives I'm going through a phase, I have to decide how much energy to spend on correcting the narrative versus just living my truth." "And what have you decided?" Mackenzie asked. "That I can't control how they see me. I can only control how I see myself." I took a sip of hot chocolate. "I spent so many years trying to prove my worth to them. Now I understand that my worth was never actually in question. Their approval was never the prize I thought it was." "That's the thing about family trauma," Jake said quietly. "The real freedom comes not when they finally give you what you needed, but when you stop needing it from them." His words resonated deeply. As a child of immigrant parents with their own challenging expectations, Jake understood family complexity in ways many others couldn't. "The funny thing is," I continued, "once I stopped trying to earn their approval, I actually became more successful. All that energy I used to spend on insecurity and self-doubt now goes into creativity and growth." Mackenzie raised her mug in a toast. "To chosen family," she said. "The people who see us clearly and love us anyway." "To chosen family," Jake and I echoed, clinking our mugs against hers. After Mackenzie left and Jake returned to his apartment, promising to call in the morning, I found myself alone with the quiet beauty of Christmas night. I walked to the window, watching snow continue to fall over the city. My phone buzzed again, another text from Heather. "Richard's parents asked about you. Showed them your website. They were impressed. Dad would hate that I told you that. Miss you." I smiled, typing back, "Miss you too. Merry Christmas." The path forward wasn't perfectly clear. Family healing rarely follows a straight line. But I had learned that standing in my truth, even when painful, was infinitely better than living in the shadow of others' expectations. I had learned that success defined by others is no success at all if it requires diminishing your authentic self. Most importantly, I had learned that family, true family, sees you for who you are, not for who they wish you would be. Sometimes that family is the one you're born into. Sometimes it's the one you build yourself. And sometimes, if you're very fortunate, it can be both. As another year approached, I felt ready for whatever it might bring, the challenges and opportunities, the growth and setbacks, the continued journey of becoming more fully myself. The girl who had once measured her worth through her family's approval had become a woman who found that worth within herself. And that, perhaps, was the greatest gift of all. Have you ever had to stand up to family expectations that didn't align with your authentic self? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey resonated with you, please like and subscribe to follow more stories of personal transformation and healing. And if you know someone who might need to hear this message, share it with them. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these struggles is the first step toward healing. Thank you for being part of my chosen family this holiday season. Remember, your worth isn't determined by others' perception of you, but by how truly you live your own story.